All right, hello, this is Jeff Scott of Jeff Teaches Programming. And in the last video that I did, which is not online yet, but will be shortly, it kind of cut off towards the end of the video and wasn't able to restore all of it. So what I'm going to do in here, ideally, what I'd like to do would be to make modifications to the validation.cs file so that I'm able to use it for both the new GUI app for BMI and also the console app. All right. Now, one thing about this is when you start looking at it over here, what I want to be able to do, see, I'm returning a string. So I'm returning, either nothing or an error message. All right. Technically, what I'd like to do, because I'm also using that in here, where I've got where we're checking for the in input and calculate output, and in our is valid data. Okay. So what I'd like to do again is to make a couple changes in here. Now, what I want to do is I don't want to remove this validation.cs file because it works, but I'd like to copy it and make some changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my validation library here, and I'm going to come in. Now, I did play around with this a little bit before, so it might be here. So if it is, I'm going to remove it. I don't know if it removed it from here or not. It looks like it's gone. That's good. All right, so what I'm going to do again is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to right mouse click on the validation library project and click add and class. And I'm going to call this, since I'm going to use it for both, I'm going to call it validation both. All right, so we've got that. And for now, I want to do two things. First, I don't think I need any of these, so I'm going to get rid of those. And second, I'm just going to copy in everything that I have right now, because it's not that I'm going to be able to use it so much, but the ideas are correct. So let's just grab everything that was between those two curly braces. And I'd like to remove it now. Let's make sure you haven't heard anything that's in here. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to do that. So now I've got, basically they're identical to one another. So what I'd like to be able to do here is I'd like to be able to return two different values. Now, with most programming languages, you can only return one thing. Now that's sort of a misnomer, because that one thing can be a group of things, but it's technically is one thing. What we've done so far is we have turned that off. So what I technically like to be able to do is return two different values from these routines. I'd like to be able to return the equivalent of a Boolean, that it's either true that we have an error or false if we have an error, whatever, and the actual message. Now, there is a way to do that. And that's what I'm going to use here. So I went out and found this online. This is from Microsoft stuff. This is called a tuple. Now, tuple has a lot of different meanings. This is not tuple in the database term. As it says, it provides a concise syntax to group multiple data elements in a lightweight data structure. So in other words, if we look at the example that's right here, and we look at this line, all right, I'm going to make it a little bigger so you can see it okay. That's created a new variable called T1. And that new variable has two values in it, a double with a value of 4.5 and an integer with a value of 3. All right, so I'm going to use that type of principle in my program right now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, and again, while I do this, I'm going to be changing some stuff around. So I'm going to get errors. And don't let that bother you one way or the other if we get errors. So the first thing is I don't want to return a string here. I want to return a tuple. All right, so let me move this down. All right. So that's the name of the function. So I'm going to replace this public static string. I'm going to replace it with a tuple, and you put tuple contents in parentheses. So I'm going to say here string, and we're going to call it ERRMSG, error message, and a Boolean, and we're just going to call this, I don't know, is error message empty. Kind of long, but you get the idea. It is somewhat self-documenting. Now we're getting an error right away. The reason we're already getting an error here is it's expecting two things to be returned, and we're only returning one. So let's fix those right now. And in fact, which one did I do? I did the isInt32 first. Let's do them in order. So we'll do the same thing right here. The isThereInput. So let me do that one. We'll go back right in just a second to the other one that I started. So again, this has got to change. So this, like I said, is going to be a string for error message, and it's going to be a Boolean that's going to be called is error message empty. Okay, so that's it right now. Now it's saying 0 references there because we're not using it yet. That space that's in here, I believe, will go away in just a bit. Again, we're going to get an error down here because we're trying to return a value where we told the system we're going to be returning 2 values. All right, so for the isThereInput, we've got this here. We can use this string that's called, message. All right, and that string will hold the error message. And I believe I had an incorrect nope, check for input. No, that's okay. Now it says here attempt to parse. We're not doing any parsing here. That's part of the wonders of copy and pasting. So I can check here, and notice I'm checking if value is equal to nothing. And that's okay, but I want to show you another way to do this. All right? So let me get rid of all this. We'll use value in just a second, but I'm going to say here string dot is null or white space. All right, so basically if it's empty, value, okay, there was no input provided. So just like we're doing now, we're going to say name cannot be empty. No change there. All right. But what's going to change is right here. We don't want to just return the message. All right. We want to return the message, and I'm going to grab this. We want to return true if the message had nothing in it, and false if there was something in the message. So look at this. Let's run through the whole thing from the top. Public static. That hasn't changed. This has changed. Before we had in here that it was going to return a string. Now we're going to have a string with the error message, and that error message will either be empty because there was no error, or it'll have something like height had no value, or weight had no value, or something like that. We also have a Boolean that we're going to return that's going to tell whether or not this error message field is empty or not empty. All right, this is the exact same thing we had before, so that's the name of our function and the parameters that are passed to it. Okay, so we've got this string that's going to hold the error message. All right, so let's add a little more to our comment here. Check to see if value passed in was empty or not. Regardless, set the message accordingly. All right. And in either case, return message. Let's just see a return message. Here. So we're checking here to see if there's anything passed into that value. If it indeed was empty, there was no input provided. So we'll say, for example, height cannot be empty or weight cannot be empty. If there was something provided, the if won't be true. So we'll just return the message which we initially set to nothing right there. We'll also check to see whether or not that message is empty or that message is not empty. So that's what we're doing right here. Sorry, somebody is at my door, believe it or not. All right, falling under the too much information, normally I tape in the bedroom of my house. It's an extra bedroom. But I'm in the living room today, and 4 little kids ring the doorbell thinking that their friend lived here. He does not. So I'm back. So we fixed that one. So let's fix this one. Make it look pretty much like the first one did. So again, this is isInt32. All right. Again, we'll have the string message. Again, we'll attempt to parse it, just like we did before. All right. And let's see, why am I getting an error here? So it says isInt32 does not exist in the current context. Well, again, here's the problem down here. Let's just, for now, we'll return message and comma true. All right, no, I want true. Okay, now, don't worry, we'll get this fixed in just a second. So we've got public, static, string again for our error message, a Boolean again for our error message empty, isInt32, string value, string name. All right. I think what's wrong here is I'm missing, I might be missing a, nope. It says it does not exist in the current content. Oh, that's why. Because I have here, there should not be a comma there. There should be a parenthesis. There we go. All right. So again, it'll come up and say 0 references there. So we come in here and we check. So again, we attempt in this case to parse the value argument. So whatever we passed in there, we're attempting to see whether or not it is an integer or not. All right, that's all we want to know. So if it doesn't work, we say that it must be a valid. Let's change it to integer. All right, period. Okay. And we're going to return just like we did, but in fact, I'm going to just grab this. We want to return the same thing. So again, we'll bring that in. So now that one is done. So we've gone in and we have changed out of our 4 functions in here, we have changed is there input so that it now deals with a tuple, a string for an error message, and a Boolean value that says whether or not that error message is empty. Same thing in our isInt32. We're now bringing in a tuple with a string of an error message and a Boolean of an is error message empty. You might have already guessed, but I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go down to our next one, which our public string is decimal, and I'm going to bring that in. All right, don't worry. Let's clean this up a little bit. It looks terrible right now. All right, so let's go down to here. So there's our is decimal. Now there's an error, going to be an error in it right now, because again, we're only returning one value. So we've got our message, and I think we said here string to hold error message. Let's put that in so we've got that in all of our functions. So we'll put it in here, and we'll put it in here. Just trying to provide some documentation. All right, so attempt to parse the value. If it's unsuccessful, set the message accordingly. In either case, return message. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing we said here. All right, so again, if it didn't work, must be a valid decimal, period. And we'll, just like we did before, we're going to return the message and this as well. So now we've got 3 of these 4 done. Finally, we want to check for our error message. So again, as you might have already guessed, or maybe not, first thing we're going to do is come in here with this. All right, I'm going to grab this. This is within range, and let's bring these over. So the changes we're making, it's not exactly that they're minor, but I would say that they're not really major either. So there we've got that. All right. Again, we want to come in and say we've got the string to hold our error message. That's what MSG is. All right. MSG is basically holding the error message. All right. So again, attempt to parse it. So what's the problem here? And I'm looking here. This is the within range. Okay. Now, again, we could change this if we wanted to. All right. And if this failed, I'm returning here. So this was the range. All right. So if we couldn't parse, we want to return this. But remember, we can't just return one thing. So we'll put in true in here. So that got rid of that error. Now we can do our range check. All right, to see if it falls within range. We don't have to change anything. Everything that we have put in here, as far as I can tell at least, everything that we have put in here is totally fine. All right, and just like before, we'll just grab this whole return statement and we'll put it in there. All right, so now we have fixed everything that we have to fix. Now we've got this thing in here and it's called validation both. And that'll work just fine. It'll work just fine right now in a couple minutes after we go in and make some changes to our main program file. All right, we're going to do that in just a second. We're going to have to change the is the data valid function, and we'll change the input and calculate and output function. We'll do both of those in just a minute. All right, now I do want to say one thing before we do that. Again, we're going to do it momentarily. So let's do a file, save all. So there that is. All right, now going back for just a second to this. All right, you can do it like this, but you can also put the word var in front. Okay, and you can, if you want, you can actually define multiple tuples in. All right, or with multiple values in there. Okay, the reason I'm telling you that is I'm going to use the word var. I looked at a bunch of examples online, and that's pretty much what they suggested you do. All right, so I'm going to go back now to the regular program in here. Okay, and again, I don't need this reflection. I do need, or I will need the validation lib, but it'll be the other one in just a minute. Okay, all right. So all this stuff is just fine. clear, calculate BMI status, all that stuff, output all statistics, clear all fields, exit program or not. We're going to have to change this input and calculate output. All right, so it doesn't matter which one we change first. So we might as well just get this one out of the way. So I've got some notes here that I'm taking a look at. All right, by the time we click this, this is what happens when we click the button that says calculate. All right, input and calculate output. All right, so that's what we want to do right here. Okay, so as we come in here, I don't think we're going to need all of these variables, to be honest with you. All right, so we're going to need the height string and we're going to need the weight string. In fact, why don't we just put these what they are? We're going to say that the height string is going to be txt height.text. And the weight string is going to be txt weight.text. Now those won't fail, even if there's nothing in there. Those won't fail. They're just strings. So that's all that they're holding there. All right? Now, the height and the weight are okay, but we're going to change around the way that we do this in just a second. All right, same thing with the BMI and the BMI status, so all this stuff. This is really all we're going to need at the top of the program here. So I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to hit enter here. All right, now what we want to check in the is this valid, again, we're going to pass in the height string, we're going to pass in the weight string. That's fine. But there's no sense in really creating a height and weight up here. We only should create it if we're here. So in other words, if this worked, by doing this, we can get rid of these up here. And we can do the same thing here. And then get rid of the BMI here. And then we can put string here and get rid of the string up here. All right. These two variables that are in here, the height string and the weight string, we can put in here, let's put a comment, height str holds the value of the height text box. It should make sense. And weight str holds the value of the weight text box. All right. So attempt to validate the values in both height str and weight str. These values must be what? For height, and int between 12 and 96. And, oops, sorry, for weight, and int between 1 and 777. That's what we're checking in here. All right. So we're going to parse, we're going to do this. So we're only doing all this stuff if is data valid return true. But if it returned false, we want to make sure that we're going to print out the values. All right. So that's the change that we have to make for our input and calculate output. All right. I don't even need this stuff in here. playing around with it a little bit before. Let me get rid of that. All right. So right now, the thing that's not wrong, but that's kind of going to be goofing us up is going to be that, notice we get the errors here, and that's okay. Is the data valid? All right. So that's what we're going to check. And after we do this, ideally at least, what's going to happen is our program is going to work successfully. That'll end this video then, and what I'll do in the next video is I'll make the corresponding changes to another version of the console application. So we'll be able to use this validation both for both the console application and the GUI application. Hopefully all that I just said made at least a little bit of sense. All right, so we've got our validation stuff in here. So let's go into here. And in fact, for now, let's just get rid of all this. Well, let's see. We've got a thing called is success. That's fine. We got a thing called error message, and that's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of virtually everything else that's in here for now. All right. We can return is success at the end. All right. Well, that cut it down a lot. Okay. But let's just keep going. Now, in order for us to be able to use this, remember, there's going to be a couple things that we have to do. The first thing we have to do is go back to our validation thing that's in here, save it, and we're going to have to do a build solution. All right? And now that should come up, and it should be clean. There shouldn't be any problem. Ooh. Okay. It's giving us some errors. A lot of errors. So, well, that's fine. We're going to fix it. Oh, I've got this test thing that I wrote before. That's the problem. Namespace test. And that form designer. I don't even know what this is from, to be honest with you. We don't have a test in here anymore. Don't know if this is going to hurt anything, but well, let's do this. Control-A, Control-C to copy. Just throw it into here for now. So I do have it if I do need it. And I'm just going to remove all this. All right. Hopefully that'll fix things. Still, it'll give me an error. Some errors in here. Form designer. So let's come in and do a file, save all, and let's see if we try to build this, if we get all these errors again. And yes, we are. Oh, it's giving me these errors that are in here. Okay. Calculate BMI status, etc. Is the data valid? I thought I'd remove this stuff. Now I got to watch what I'm doing here because I want to make sure I'm working with the right version here. 5th iteration. I may have removed some stuff from the 4th iteration. If I did, shame on me. I'm going to grab this and get rid of it. Grab this and get rid of it. Get rid of this and get rid of this. Okay. That got rid of a lot of stuff that was in here. So file, save all. Let's come back to my validation library. Let's make that the startup project or whatever. And we're going to just come in and see if we can build that now. Doggone it. Oh my goodness. Well, you can see that I'm running into all sorts of problems here. I'm going to have to fix this, so I'll be back in just a couple minutes to at least try. In fact, I'm at 30 minutes. Let's stop right here and we'll do another video where we'll hopefully clean this up.